My sisters thought shredding my wedding dress was just a hilarious prank, but they didn't realize they were playing with fire while they were packing for a luxury getaway. I was secretly canceling their first-class flights instead of a tropical paradise. They're about to face a 60-hour nightmare on a bus. That thought didn't come to me all at once. It settled in slowly, piece by piece, the same way the dress had been taken apart. When I pushed open the door to the bridal suite, the air still smelled faintly like rose spray and hot fabric from the steamer I'd used the night before. For a second, nothing felt wrong. My suitcase was still by the chair. My shoes were lined up neatly near the wall. Everything looked staged for a calm, careful morning. Then something shifted under my foot. A soft, brittle sound, not loud enough to register as danger, just enough to make me pause. I glanced down and saw a strip of silk twisted near my heel, thin and lifeless, like it had no memory of what it used to be. My eyes followed it across the floor. The dress bag hung open by the window. Its zipper dragged all the way down. Beneath it, scattered across the carpet, were pieces of what used to be my gown. Long panels of ivory fabric, torn lace, a cluster of pearls that had come loose and rolled into the shadows near the dresser. I didn't rush forward. My body moved carefully, almost politely, like I was entering someone else's space. When I crouched down, the carpet pressed softly against my knees. I picked up a section of lace, and the edge of it felt wrong immediately. Too clean, too precise. The cuts ran in straight, deliberate lines, not jagged like something accidental. Whoever did this hadn't hesitated. They'd worked through it patiently. My phone vibrated on the vanity. Lila's name lit up the screen. I opened the message and pressed play without thinking, like my hands were moving on their own. The video was bright, overexposed from a ring light positioned somewhere behind them. Lila stood in the center, holding part of my skirt up like it was something ridiculous. Sophie hovered beside her, gripping the shears, already laughing before anything even happened. "Relax," Lila said, her voice light, careless. "She takes everything way too seriously." Sophie leaned in and cut straight through another layer, the blades slicing clean, metallic, efficient. The sound landed sharper than I expected. They both burst into louder laughter, the kind that builds on itself when no one tells you to stop. "This is literally an upgrade," Sophie added, shaking her head. It needed personality. The camera tilted, catching the floor covered in what used to be my dress, then swung back to their faces, flushed and pleased with themselves. Then it ended. I stood there, the phone still in my hand. The room suddenly too quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed to have paused between cycles, like the space itself was waiting for a reaction I hadn't given yet. The dress wasn't just expensive. $5,000 was a number, something I could replace if I had to, but I could still see my grandmother sitting in that boutique chair, watching me step out from behind the curtain, the way her eyes softened, the way she reached for my hand without saying anything right away. She had passed 3 months later. That dress had become something I carried forward for her, and Lila and Sophie had stood in this exact room, under that same light, and turned it into a joke. There was a familiar pattern threaded through all of it. It wasn't new, just louder this time. They had always found ways to tilt things, to take moments that mattered to me and twist them just enough to make me look unreasonable if I reacted. A ruined birthday, a graduation overshadowed by some careless stunt. Small things, always framed as accidents or humor, always followed by someone telling me not to overreact. I had built a life around absorbing that. At work, I was the one people trusted when something needed to be fixed without drama. I handled negotiations, managed crises, smoothed over problems before they escalated. In my family, I played the same role. Keep things moving, keep things calm, don't make it bigger than it needs to be. Standing in that room, holding a strip of lace that no longer had a place to belong. I felt that instinct rise automatically. Fix it, replace it, move on. But something didn't follow through this time. Instead, I looked back down at the floor. at the deliberate cuts, at the way the fabric had been reduced to something unrecognizable, and I let the silence stretch a little longer than usual. They hadn't just crossed a line. They had erased it and laughed while doing it, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to repair what they'd broken. I was thinking about what it would look like if I stopped protecting them from the consequences. The room was quiet in a way that felt almost staged, like the moment after someone leaves and the air hasn't quite settled yet. I set the torn lace back down on the carpet. Not carefully, not gently, just enough to let it go, and walked over to the desk by the window. My laptop was still open from the night before. A half-finished seating chart glowed faintly on the screen. Names arranged in neat rows, every potential conflict already anticipated and softened. That was what I did. I anticipated. I prevented things from getting ugly. I closed the document. The reflection in the darkened screen held for a second before the system woke back up, casting that cool, bluish light across the desk. My coffee from earlier had gone cold, the surface flat and untouched, like time had paused while I wasn't looking. I sat down, rested my hands on the keyboard, and didn't move right away. There's a difference between reacting and deciding. I'd spent most of my life doing the first. This time felt different, slower, cleaner. I opened my banking app first. The spa charges came up immediately. 3 days at a luxury resort just outside Palm Springs, multiple services booked back to back, massages, facials, private cabana rentals, all charged to the card I'd given Lila weeks ago when she said she needed it just to hold the reservation. I scrolled through the timestamps. They hadn't just used it, they'd leaned into it. A second tab, airline confirmation, 2 first-class tickets, non-refundable, premium seats, lounge access, priority, everything. Departing the morning after the rehearsal dinner. Returning just in time for the wedding weekend to stay intact on the surface. Like nothing had happened. They hadn't been subtle about it. They had assumed the same thing they always did, that I would absorb the cost. Smooth it over. And keep the story clean. My fingers hovered for a moment over the trackpad. Then I clicked. The airline page loaded with that crisp, efficient layout I knew well. Modify booking, cancel flight, credit issued, the numbers recalculated in a neat column, shifting from expense to usable balance. No hesitation, no second guessing, just a series of small, precise actions. The confirmation email came through almost instantly. I didn't open it. Instead, I moved on. Bus routes took longer, not because they were complicated, but because I took my time with it. I mapped out the path from Illinois to Southern California, tracing lines across unfamiliar stops and transfer points, long stretches between cities, overnight segments, layovers that stretched just enough to make everything feel heavier. 3 days, multiple stops, seats that didn't recline far enough to matter. I selected the times carefully. Early departure, minimal buffer. Enough pressure that missing one connection would ripple through the entire trip. When I reached the payment page, I used the credit from the canceled flights, even exchange, technically. The printer in the corner of the room hummed to life a few minutes later, feeding out sheet after sheet of thin paper. The ink was still warm when I picked them up, the edges slightly curled. I stacked them neatly and set them on the desk, behind me. The bridal suite looked unchanged if you didn't know where to look. The flowers still stood in their vase. The bed was still made. The sunlight coming through the window softened everything, almost enough to blur what was scattered across the floor. My phone lit up again, another message from Lila. A photo this time. She and Sophie were poolside, oversized sunglasses, drinks in hand, sunlight reflecting off the water behind them. The caption was short. Don't stress. We're celebrating for you. I watched the screen for a second longer than I needed to, then locked it without replying. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt controlled. Noah knocked once before stepping into the room, his expression shifting the moment he saw the floor. He didn't say anything right away. His eyes moved from the scattered fabric to the open dress bag, then to me. What happened? I handed him the phone. He watched the video without interrupting, his jaw tightening slightly at the sound of the scissors. When it ended, He exhaled slowly and set the phone down on the desk. They knew what they were doing. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. His gaze shifted to the papers stacked beside my laptop. He glanced down, scanned a line or two, then looked back up at me with something that almost resembled surprise. "You already handled it." I handled the part they assumed I wouldn't. There was no edge in my voice, no raised tone, just a statement. He studied me for a second, like he was recalibrating something. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I thought about the lace on the floor, the sound of the scissors, the way they'd laughed like none of it mattered. Then I picked up the stack of printed tickets and aligned the edges against the desk. "I'm not going through with anything," I said quietly. "I'm just not fixing it for them anymore." The restaurant my parents picked for brunch was one of those places that tried very hard to look effortless. White linen tablecloths, polished silverware, sunlight pouring through tall windows like it had been arranged in advance. The kind of place where everything felt calm on the surface, even when it wasn't. I arrived a few minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I wanted a moment to take the room in before everything started moving. The hostess led me to the long table near the back. Already set for 8, my mother had chosen it weeks ago, talking about how nice it would be to have one peaceful meal together before the wedding. Peaceful. I slid into my seat and placed my bag carefully by the chair leg. The stack of tickets rested inside. Flat, uncreased. I hadn't looked at them again since printing them. I didn't need to. The first to arrive were my parents. My mother kissed my cheek, her perfume soft and familiar, like nothing had shifted. My father gave me a quick nod, his attention already drifting toward the menu, as if staying neutral was the safest place to stand. Then came Lila and Sophie. You could hear them before you saw them, laughter spilling ahead of them, bright and unbothered. Lila wore oversized sunglasses pushed up into her hair, her skin still carrying that faint glow from the sun. Sophie had a tote bag slung over her shoulder, something colorful peeking out from the top. They slid into their seats like they owned the moment. "There she is," Lila said, leaning forward slightly. "The bride." Her tone carried that same lightness from the video, as if the past 24 hours hadn't happened, as if the room they had left behind still looked exactly the same. Sophie reached into her tote and pulled something out, a strip of ivory fabric. She held it between 2 fingers, almost casually, then let it fall onto the table in front of me. It landed near my water glass, soft and weightless. "We made you a keepsake," she said, a small smile tugging at her mouth. The table didn't react right away. My mother's hand paused halfway to her coffee cup. My father's gaze lifted, just slightly. Noah, seated beside me, didn't move at all. I looked down at the piece of fabric. The edge was clean, deliberate, recognizable. I picked it up, folded it once, then set it beside my plate without a word. The waiter arrived, breaking the moment with a practiced smile and a question about drinks. Orders were placed, coffee poured. The rhythm of the restaurant filled in the gaps, clinking glasses and low conversations blending into something almost normal. Lila leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms slightly. "So," she said, glancing at Sophie, then back at me, "we didn't get a chance to give you our real gift yet." Sophie nodded, already reaching for her bag again. "We went all out," she added. "You're going to love it." I reached into my own bag before they could continue. The envelopes were simple, no decoration, just thick paper, folded cleanly. I placed one in front of Lila, then another in front of Sophie. "For you," I said. My voice came out even, not sharp, not warm, just steady. They exchanged a quick look, something flickering between them curiosity, maybe a hint of surprise. Lila picked hers up first, running her finger under the flap, tearing it open without much thought. Sophie followed a second later. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Their eyes moved across the pages, scanning quickly at first, then slowing down as the details settled in. The shift was small, but it was there. Lila's posture straightened. Sophie's smile faded, just enough to notice. "What is this?" Lila asked. her tone no longer as light. "Your trip," I said. Sophie flipped through the pages again, more carefully this time. "These aren't—" She stopped, then looked up. "Where are our flights?" "They're gone." The words landed softly, but they didn't leave much room for interpretation. Lila let out a short laugh, like she was waiting for the punchline. "Okay, very funny. Seriously, where are the actual tickets?" I took a sip of water before answering. "There aren't any." The table had gone quieter than the rest of the room. Conversations from nearby tables drifted in, but around us, everything felt suspended. Sophie leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You canceled them, I converted them," I said. "You still have transportation." Lila looked back down at the papers, her eyes moving faster now, catching details she'd missed the first time. Departure times, transfer points, total duration. 60 hours, she said, her voice tightening despite her attempt to keep it controlled. "Give or take," I replied. Sophie pushed her chair back slightly, the legs scraping softly against the floor. "This isn't funny." "Evelyn, I'm not joking." For the first time, there was no laughter to cushion it, no performance. Just the reality of what sat in front of them. Lila's grip on the paper tightened, the edges bending under her fingers. "You can't just—" she started, then stopped herself, glancing briefly at our parents before lowering her voice again. "Fix this. Call them back. We're not getting on a bus." I met her gaze. "You already have the tickets. That's not what I mean." "I know." The silence that followed stretched just long enough to make everything feel sharper. Then I placed my fork down beside my plate and spoke again, just as evenly as before. "You can take the trip as it is," I said, "or you can stay home." Sophie stared at me, something unsettled finally breaking through. "And if we don't," I held her gaze without shifting, "then you won't be at the wedding. No raised voices, no dramatic pause. Just a line, placed exactly where it needed to be." The first message came through a little after midnight. I was standing by the window in the bridal suite. The city stretched out below in scattered lights when my phone buzzed against the glass. The vibration was sharp in the quiet, like it didn't belong there. "Lila." I let it ring once more before picking it up. A photo filled the screen. Harsh fluorescent lighting, rows of hard plastic seats bolted to the floor. Sophie slumped against a metal armrest in the background, her head tilted at an awkward angle, her hair pulled into a loose knot that had already started to fall apart. The caption came through a second later. "Are you serious right now?" Another message followed before I could even lock the screen. "We've been here for 2 hours. The bus is delayed." Then another. "You need to fix this." I stared at the image a moment longer than necessary. There was something different about seeing them like that. Not filtered, not posed, no sunlight, no drinks, no curated angles. Just exhaustion starting to settle in, even though they'd barely begun. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I set the phone down on the table without replying. Behind me, the room was warm, lit by soft lamps instead of overhead lights. Someone had left a candle burning near the sink, a faint vanilla scent drifting through the air. My new dress hung near the closet, untouched, the fabric falling in clean. Uninterrupted lines. I walked over to it, running my fingers lightly along the seam. Smooth, intact, quiet. The phone buzzed again, and again. When I picked it up this time, it wasn't just Lila. Sophie had started messaging too. We missed the first connection. They won't hold the next one. Do you understand how far this is? A photo came through, blurred slightly from motion. A bus pulling in, headlights cutting through the dark, the side of it streaked with dirt from the road. Another message. "This is insane." I leaned back against the edge of the desk, reading through them without reacting. The words came faster now, overlapping, losing structure the longer they went on. "You've made your point. Call them. We're not doing this for 3 days." Somewhere between the messages, I could hear the echo of the video again, the laughter, the easy way they had moved through something that wasn't theirs to break. I locked the phone and set it face down. The silence returned, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt deliberate, Chosen. In the morning. The light came in softer. I woke to a quieter set of notifications. Fewer messages, more spaced out. The tone had shifted, even if the words hadn't. We haven't slept. Everything smells like diesel. They won't let us bring all the bags on. I sat at the small table by the window with a cup of coffee, scrolling through them slowly. Each one painted a piece of the same picture-stiff seats. Long waits, unfamiliar stops, no control over the pace, no way to skip ahead. Outside, the city was already moving, cars passing in steady lines, people crossing streets with purpose. Everything felt structured, predictable. Inside the phone, nothing did. A new message came through. This time from my mother. I spoke to your sisters. I read the sentence twice before opening the rest. They're struggling. There was a pause in the thread, like she had started typing something else and stopped. Then another message. You didn't have to go this far. I set the phone down beside my cup. Steam rose from the surface, curling upward before disappearing into the air. I watched it for a moment, then reached for the handle and took a sip. The warmth settled slowly, grounding in a way the messages weren't. Noah stepped out of the adjoining room, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. You've been quiet, he said, glancing at the phone, then back at me. I shrugged slightly. They're on schedule. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. Instead, he nodded once and moved toward the door, pausing just long enough to meet my eyes. You okay? I thought about the suite, the dress, the messages stacked in my phone like a timeline I could scroll through but didn't have to respond to. Then I nodded. I am. The rest of the day unfolded without interruption. Fittings, final confirmations, small conversations that stayed where they belonged, light and manageable. At some point, my father called. His voice was lower than usual, measured. They'll make it back, he said. Eventually? I know. There was a pause on the line. Then, quieter. You didn't raise your voice. No. Another pause. Longer this time. Good. When the call ended, I set the phone aside again. The room felt steady, not because nothing was happening, but because, for once, I wasn't the one holding everything together. By the time the rehearsal dinner started, the light outside had softened into that late afternoon glow that makes everything look a little warmer than it really is. The venue had floor-to-ceiling windows, glass catching the last of the sun and scattering it across the polished wood floors. Conversations layered over each other in low, steady waves, the kind that make a room feel full without ever getting loud. I stood near the entrance for a moment before walking in, not to make an entrance, just to take it in. My reflection caught briefly in the glass door as I stepped through. The new dress fit the way it was supposed to. Clean lines, no excess, nothing that needed adjusting. It didn't carry history the way the other one had, but it didn't carry weight either. It moved with me instead of asking me to hold it together. Noah reached for my hand as I crossed the room, his fingers brushing mine just long enough to anchor the moment. You ready? He asked quietly. I nodded. The shift happened before anyone said a word. It wasn't loud or obvious, just a ripple moving through the room as a few heads turned toward the back entrance. Conversations didn't stop completely, but they slowed, stretched thinner, like everyone was waiting without admitting it. I followed the direction of their attention. Lila came in first. She didn't look like herself at a glance. Her posture was different, shoulders slightly rounded, movements smaller, like she was measuring every step instead of taking space the way she usually did. Her hair was pulled back in a loose tie that had slipped down unevenly. The outfit she wore might have been fine 3 days ago, but now it carried the marks of travel creases that hadn't fallen out, fabric that no longer held its shape. Sophie stepped in behind her. She looked even more tired, not just physically, but in the way her eyes moved around the room, taking everything in with a kind of cautious awareness that hadn't been there before. The tote bag was still on her shoulder, but it hung lower now, heavier, for a second. Neither of them moved further into the room. Then my mother crossed the space between them. She didn't rush. She didn't make a scene. She simply reached out, touched Lila's arm, then Sophie's, guiding them forward with a quiet firmness that felt different from before. Not indulgent, not dismissive, just clear. My father stood nearby, his expression steady, when Lila looked at him, like she was searching for something familiar to hold on to. He didn't step in to soften anything. He just gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledges without rescuing. They had made it back, not comfortably, not easily. But they were here. Lila's gaze found me across the room. There was no smile this time, no quick remark ready to smooth over the tension. Just a moment of stillness, like she was deciding what version of herself to bring forward. She walked over slowly, up close. The details were clearer, the faint shadow under her eyes, the dryness at the edges of her lips, the way her hands stayed close to her sides instead of gesturing freely. "We made it," she said. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I can see that." Sophie joined her a second later, her expression more guarded. "That was—" she started, then stopped, like she didn't have a word that fit. Neither of them mentioned the bus directly. They didn't need to. It was in the way they stood, the way they looked at everything like it could be taken away if they weren't careful. For a moment, no one spoke. The noise of the room filled in around us again, glasses clinking, someone laughing too loudly at the far end of the table, a chair scraping softly against the floor. Lila shifted her weight slightly. "We didn't think you'd actually do it," she said. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for my wrist, adjusting the thin band resting there. A narrow strip of ivory silk, twisted once and tied cleanly. It was one of the few pieces I'd kept from the original dress, not as a reminder of what was lost, but as something I chose to carry forward differently. "I know," I said. Sophie glanced at the bracelet, then back at me, her eyes lingering a second longer this time. Something in the space between us had changed, not repaired, not softened, just reset across the room. My mother was speaking with one of my aunts, her posture straighter, her tone more certain. My father had taken his place near the head of the table, not avoiding anything, not stepping in too early. The balance of things had shifted in small, visible ways, no announcements, no declarations, just a different way of standing. I took a slow breath, letting it settle before moving toward my seat. The evening would continue. The wedding would happen. Life would move forward, the way it always does. But something had drawn a line that couldn't be ignored anymore. And for once, I wasn't the one stepping back from it. Respect in a family doesn't come from history or obligation. It shows up the moment you stop making room for people to cross you and expect nothing in return.